Hi, this is a recording for Patient Client Management 5. In this video, I'm going to do a quick introduction overview of, I guess, what we would call the quadrants or the algorithm approach to the course. This is just, I guess, the overview should include the fact that these systems are simply ways to try to help you think through the way you would evaluate, the way you would determine the kind of help you prioritize your focus and decide how to address patients who are seemingly complicated and sometimes scary because of the medical stability issues that can come up, but also weave it into what it means as a physical therapist to think about these individuals. For example, um, any we're always thinking about how patients are meeting their basic needs, and you would say, the basic needs are water. Water's a basic need. So how are they getting fluid? And can they get up? Can they get to wherever they need to get it? Or is someone there to help them get it? But you can go without water for a little while. Food, same idea. You can go without food for a little while. But some of the conditions we're going to be talking about in this class, we're really talking about potential interruptions to oxygen, whether it be from impaired ventilation, impaired respiration, or impaired cardiac pump function, where we deliver oxygen out to the tissues, or even delivering oxygen to some of the most vital tissues, such as the heart and the brain. So um, you can't go very long without oxygen. So this is a class where you start talking about treating individuals who have a real risk, um, or I should say a higher risk, because everyone has a real risk. These are real events that happen in lives, and they happen to people when they're sick. And that what separates physical therapists from a whole bunch of other people that provide rehabilitation-like services vis-a-vis exercise programming is that we are licensed to provide care to individuals who are medically ill. Um, that's really what makes physical therapists. I know that there's a big push for wellness, and I'm all for that, and I'm behind that. Personally, I think that the moment we are born, we start having we have a period of development, no doubt, but there are insults from the environment to our vital physiological systems. So every single individual is potentially has some kind of disequilibrium, some kind of lack of homeostatic capacity um, that needs to be considered. So it's it is a lot of things to think about in this class, and it intentionally pulls a lot together, which I've hopefully already said in some of the earlier introductory videos. To keep this short, I had developed several years ago for a home health VNA as part of a project with them this what's called Quadrant, which I now call Quadrants 1. And there's a set of videos that really goes into talking about Quadrants 1. So I'm going to bring you over to the YouTube playlist, which is still in development. Um, I've just recorded the Quadrants 2.0, and I'm not sure exactly where to put that. It's kind of the more preferred approach at this point. As you'll see, the algorithm is much more developed than the one in for the Quadrants 1.0 model. But the quadrants are very similar. There's slightly different terminology. Quadrants 2 is a little broader. It's essentially considering attaining a workload or an activity, and sustaining a workload or an activity in a very generic way. Basically, the idea being that endurance, the ability to sustain, can be a potential problem for any individual, not just people with cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases, which is really what the first quadrant system, Quadrant 1.0, essentially emphasizes um, the cardiovascular and pulmonary system, and that's an unnecessary part for this course. Um, as you've been doing throughout the patient-client management sequence in various ways, in various times, and maybe not to an extent, not always to the same extent that we'll try to do in this class. There'll be an ICF focus, so have a functional focus. We'll be talking about participation, activity, body structures and functions, and all of the connected components of that model of thinking. A big part of this course will be the discussion of attain versus sustain, and I go into that more in the sequence of videos, tutorial 1 through 7, which is a highly recommended sequence. They are dated. There's not a video of me, so that's either good or bad. I'm not really sure. I'm not 100% sure why I do the video. And they will go over quadrant 1, and then after you watch those, or maybe even before, just to give you a sort of a preview of how things are going to be different, potentially different, you could watch quadrants 2. But let me just show you here in the Moodle page under course resources, I've got quadrants 1, 2 versions of the algorithm for some reason, and then the table. So let me show you version 1 of the algorithm. Okay, so this is, I think, the original in the color. So is the patient stable at rest? And if they're not, then you need to consider what to do. When you're considering stability, you're looking at resting signs and symptoms, temporal changes in resting signs and symptoms, orthostatic changes potentially. That's just an example of a challenge. I could put up there exercise tolerance test. That would be another way to test stability, but probably not at rest. So yeah, don't use an exercise tolerance test to test stability at rest. Okay, so if the answer is yes, then is function due to limited or reduced endurance? So you can see with this algorithm compared to quadrant 2, which hopefully you already watched, or that you're going to watch. I'm confusing myself, sorry. Put these two algorithms together and you'll see what the similarities and differences are. So in this algorithm, it gets right to the point. It gets right to endurance as a limiting. Is it due to reduce endurance? And it says yes. And if it's no, then it says it's the wrong pathway. So this is something that I've revised with Quadrants 2.0. And for very many reasons, I should just be using Quadrant 2.0. The main reason I'm showing you this at this point is because there's a couple hours worth of videos that I've already recorded that are based on this, and the core components of them are the same. So I'm going to keep those videos as opposed to redoing those. So assuming that this is basically asking, can they sustain? And if they can't sustain, then is it due to a disease-specific impairment? Is this due to something to do with the cardiovascular and pulmonary system? That's what that's asking there. Now, and then if it's not due to the cardiovascular system, then it does ask the question, are they reversible? And if it is the cardiovascular system, then it also asks whether it's reversible. But this is kind of a step that we're sort of eliminating at this point. This is a really big difference between the current Quadrant 2.0 and this model here. So the other algorithm is just using a different system, but it's essentially the same. Stable at rest, is there an endurance limitation, is it due to disease-specific impairments? I mean, another way to say this would be, do they have difficulty with community ambulation? Yes. Is it due to their heart failure? And you'd be surprised, you can't always say yes to that right away. There needs to be some consideration. In fact, the greatest degree of change can occur in individuals that it's not due to their heart failure. I think that probably makes sense. So another piece that I should give you during this introduction is the definition of endurance that we're going to use. So, and I'll have this in writing. I'll put a document about endurance under course resources. But the definition of endurance that we're going to use, and then I'm definitely willing to talk about this if people have problems with it. It's really not controversial though. It's the ability to sustain work long enough to complete the task. I think I have other variations on that, but that's the primary definition that I think I'd like to work with. But yeah, here's another variation. Endurance, the ability to sustain work for as long as required to complete the task. Okay. So that's where I think I'll end this video. And highly recommend that after you watch this video, you watch the tutorials. I would start with Quadrants 2 just to let you see how it's different than the other, the Quadrant 1.0.